Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another installment of our Thursday VS Code live streams. I'm Olivia, back at it again, excited to be here. And honestly, these live streams are like my only way to remember what day of the week it is. I know if it's a live stream, it's a Thursday. I know I got one more day until the weekend, and that's kind of, it really is very impactful for me to kind of keep track here. So what's going on, chat? I was super impressed because when I logged on today, there was a chat from 2:31 p.m. yesterday, I assume. So who gives a T? You really fought to be the very first one. I'm very impressed. You had almost a whole day ahead of everyone. So you got it today. Hello, Mimsiak. Nice to have you here. So if you all have been to these before, you know that we kind of spend the first few minutes of chit chat while people trickle in because people don't come to things on time. It's cool to be late. So sometimes we play games. Sometimes we just interact with you in the chat. But I want to get y'all's opinion for what you want us to do in these first few minutes, because we want it to be interesting enough to reward the people who actually show up on time, right? And then we want to make people jealous who weren't actually able to come. So drop in the chat what you want us to do here. Did you like last week where we had multiple hosts and we just kind of chatted with each other? Do you want us to maybe do a story time? We could do like relevant tech news. Or are you kind of just like, Olivia, get to the point. I came here to learn about JSON editing, and let's just do that. Let me know. We got, can we play a game, please? That's always a good one to go to. I think that we need to have like a good backlog of games. I know like Vim Adventures was one that was mentioned, so we could play that if we want to. Gmail Nexus. I feel this. Reward people who show up on time and start on time. I get that. But we want to be inclusive, right? We want to make sure that everyone's there. So we want to do this. What would you want to see then? If you logged on, you're like, hey, let's just get to the point. What would you want to see instead? Just for a few minutes to make it so that it's interesting to you. I know that, Jason or JSON. This, Burke, you set me up for this. This is a great question because for my whole life, I said JSON. That's what I said. And then I heard a bunch of people say Jason. So then I Googled it and apparently it's Jason. So I don't know what everyone else thinks, but I'm going to try really hard to say Jason this time, but there's a very good chance that JSON's going to come out because that's what I've said for the last 25 years, basically. So we'll see how it goes. Let me know how y'all pronounce it. If this is going to be another GIF debate, then so be it. Okay, so I think that we probably are having a good amount of people trickle in. So we can go ahead and bring on our host. So today we're going to talk a little bit about an extension in VS Code that our host Kyle created that makes editing JSON data a lot easier. So without further ado, let's bring on Kyle.
Hello. Here
Hey,
I am.
Kyle.
Hi. Nice to
Welcome.
be here. Thanks for having me.
How's it going?
It's going well. I'm excited to talk about Depot with people who I think will get it.
I think so too. We've already got a lot of comments. We already have people asking questions about this, if the extension's free, all that good stuff. So
$10,000. I'm sorry. You gotta
no less. That's it.
Yeah, it's $10,000. You can pay me. I'll send you an email.
You have to pay in gift cards. That's how it works.
Yeah, only paying gift cards. It's very free. It is the most free it could be. I don't know if it could be any freer.
Cool. That's what we like to hear, and that's what our viewers like to hear. Because I know we already had some people show up. We got someone who's a student said that just got out of their computer architecture class. So I am sure you appreciate free things, because when I was a student, I was all about the free. If there's an event, there's free pizza. I was there. I didn't even care what the event was. Give me.
I don't know how like free Visual Studio Code extensions compare to free pizza though. I feel like I'd take free pizza before free extensions.
That's true. If we download your extension, will we get free pizza with it? Is that like a nice perk we'll get?
No.
Maybe in the next release. Okay, cool. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about Depot and what it does?
Yeah, so Depot, I guess like the sort of the programmer description of it is that it is a it's a data editing tool inside of Visual Studio Code that allows you to edit JSON data like a spreadsheet. So if you've ever edited JSON before, you know that JSON is effectively schemaless. There are things like JSON schema that try to kind of, it's a spec to apply kind of validation for a JSON file. This takes a slightly different approach and actually lets you edit JSON data like a spreadsheet, and specifically using editing tools that kind of clamp effectively the way you edit it. So oftentimes you open up a JSON file and it's, you know, it looks like JSON. You have to go into text, you're editing all the actual fields. Oops, this value that is supposed to be a float, I put in a string, or this thing that was an array, I forgot to like close a bracket or whatever. Classic JSON problems. Depot kind of goes around all of that. So instead of making it where you're editing the data directly, you're instead editing the data in kind of this view. So what this effectively means for people who've used the Visual Studio Code API before, Depot is a web view extension for Visual Studio Code that kind of sits on top of a JSON file. So as you're editing stuff in the web view, it's actually writing to the underlying JSON file, and I can show you some of that. But it basically makes working with JSON, especially at scale, a lot more manageable. On top of that, we do a lot of other fun things that I can show off. But at a baseline, it's like use cases are specifically, you're trying to put together like a database of some sort. You want like kind of like a local database that feels a little bit like a tool like Airtable, or you want kind of, you know, you have some config files, you have translation files, you have, I built it specifically for video games. So it's a really great way to put together a video game database for like items or whatever. And I can show you some of that as well. But effectively, it's just if you have a need for data wrangling inside of a application, especially like a local application, or even, I mean, it is just one file as well. So you can push this to wherever you're deploying your application. It's a great use. I actually even use it to manage the documentation for Depot on GitHub. So even the documentation of specific field types and stuff, that is all actually written in Depot. And then I kind of unroll that into Markdown when I actually push to the wiki. So there's like a ton of use cases for it. And part of me doing the stream is to also kind of spread the word about it. So more people know about it. It is like, it does have, I don't know, it's nice. It's got like 5,000 something downloads for the extension marketplace. So I think people are using it. And I use it in production on a pretty big video game. So I do know that it is really good, and it's also free. So I'm happy to show people what it is, what it can do, and then also answer any questions about what they want to know.
Yeah, that sounds great. So we do have a comment that says, talk is cheap. Show me the code.
Show you the
So
code.
with that,
Okay.
let's dive into it.
Well, do you want to see the code, or do you want to see the, you know, yeah,
Let's see the goods first.
We'll see the goods first. Okay, so I'll just like, for like, if you've never downloaded a Visual Studio Code extension before, Depot is part of the Visual Studio Code marketplace, so there's no need to download an external program. It just runs in the editor. This was also kind of a key thing about code in general, is that I'm programming my game inside of Visual Studio Code. I do not want to leave Visual Studio Code to go edit data. So I can literally just kind of like be coding, open up my Depot file, add some data, go back.
Kyle, real quick, can you just bump it like a few ticks, the font, so we can see a little better? Perfect.
Great.
Thank you.
So if you never installed an extension before, open up the extension menu and you can type in Depot, and it is the only thing, I guess there's a few. There's Depot Data Editor here. On it, you can install it. It works great. Also, I will plug this right now. PRs are definitely open. We're looking for more contributors to this. The whole thing is open source. So if you want to clone it down and use it, I would happy to have some help on this. So anyways, you install the extension like any other extension, and then I'm just going to exit this. And at a default, when you download Depot, you can then make your own new Depot file through the Command P menu that a lot of you probably know and love. So if you type in Depot, it says create a new Depot file. It will then prompt you to say what you want your Depot file to be called. By default, the Depot extension recognizes .depot files as files to open up in the Depot editor. So if you ever used any other sort of like web view extensions, like there's like the paint tool, and there's also the kind of the assembly debugger, or I think it's the hex debugger extension, sort of similar, where it triggers off of an extension. So You can't just open up a JSON file. It has to have specifically a .depot extension. Anyways, I'm going to just use the default here and press enter. And now we have a depot file. I'm going to go ahead and save this. And so just show you right now. So I'm currently just inside of this depot live stream folder with my depot.depot file here. And just to show you this other thing, I guess I could, let's see, terminal.
Can we bump it one more tick too, just to make it extra zoomed?
Yeah. So we can look in here inside my directory right now. I have this depot file. And if I just cat this out, I can see here that we basically, this file is just JSON. So the depot format does require a specific schema. So you shouldn't really directly edit this JSON file unless you know what you're doing. But we'll kind of cat this, and there's other ways to look at what's going on to see how this JSON file is changing. So even though right now, like we're seeing this, if I was just to change this to JSON, this is actually what I'm looking at. So this is what the file is, but our extension basically sits on top of that file and allows you to edit this. So let's go back here, rename this to depot. Here we go. So step one, click the button below to create a new sheet in depot and get started. So I'll click this. This view inside of depot, I call the configurator. Basically, it allows you to kind of edit fields and sheets and stuff. So you'll see it a lot. I'm just going to keep the defaults here. I can set a name, I can set a description, and I'll click create. And now we have our first depot file. And I'm going to close this so it's a little easier to read. So what you can first see here is that we've got a sheet and a line. I'm going to once again, actually, because we were just looking at this, let's just can I do this? No. So now we can see that inside of our JSON file, we now have this like format. So Depot's already started injecting some data to say like, hey, there's a sheet here. These are my lines, etc. And as we start adding stuff to this thing, we kind of are building almost like a JSON schema against the data itself, so it stays like validated. So I've got my sheet here. What can I do with this, right? So step one, I've disabled this in my settings, but you can turn this on. When you make a new sheet, you have this option of adding field types. So again, if anyone's ever used a tool like Airtable, or I want to say there's like some other sort of similar tool, you can add in fields to your sheet that are kind of validated against specific types. So we have integers, floats, booleans, text, long text, image, file. This is basically an enum, kind of a single select, like a radio button. This is more like a list, multi-select. These are more advanced types where you can link to other sheets or link to other specific lines. This is a nested type, which we can maybe get into. This is a property type, which we could also get into. And then there's also a grid, which is also another advanced thing. But just at a baseline, right? Let's say, I don't know, chat, is there anything that you'd want to make a database for that I can sketch out some data for? Someone says more zoom if possible. I give maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, I think you're probably good at this point. But yeah, chat, what do you want to see? What kind of data do you want to see here? This is your call.
Someone says Overwatch Heroes. We could do Overwatch Heroes. Fruits database. Yeah. I don't know. Do you have a preference, Olivia?
No, dealer's choice.
All right. Let's do because let's do fruits because I love Overwatch, but I don't know how many people understand Overwatch stuff. So I'm going to, let's assume we're doing fruits, right? So first step, we can make some new entries. So we got an apple, we got an orange, We've got, I spelled orange wrong.
Orange.
Orange.
The new fruit.
Mango. So you can have fruits, and so you can add lines. That's easy. That's normal spreadsheet stuff. We can say fruits have like a general, maybe they have some like general weight. So we can say, we call this like, I don't know, average weight, something. So maybe this is like, we'll assume this is ounces. So I don't know. I'm just guessing here. Also worth noting, so this is, so under the hood right now, this is a floating point field. So the text box won't actually let me enter text. So I'm typing text right now and it's not going to enter. So just again, right, if you were to make a very simple JSON tree that just had names of fruits as well as their weights, if you're just editing JSON in terms of text, right, you could just type in whatever. This will literally not let you type in text because you said the field was a floating point field. So you have to type a number, or it's an integer number. Other stuff, so we could say, we could add some more text. Let's say this, I don't know, call it general look or something. Red and round, orange and round, like orange red, also round.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this is like very basic use of depot. This is saying like, okay, I want to just have a street list of stuff with properties, and I want to make it so that when I'm editing my data, I can't like mess up. So I want to make sure that if I'm sending my database to someone, they can't enter text, so there's supposed to be an integer field because it will break my application if it expects an integer, et cetera, et cetera. But then you could start getting like a lot more interesting with what you can do with Depot. And we really lean into the fact that JSON is like a nested it's like a nested format. So right now we've got our fruits, but let's say what we also want to do, we want to say where these fruits can be found. So maybe let's make a new sheet. We can call this locations, maybe. And then so locations, let's say, I don't know, America, Brazil, Spain. What else can we do here? I don't know. Countries, Canada, something like that. And then on our sheet back inside it, and so now we have both of these sheets exist side by side. And then once again, just to drive this home, this is still just one depot file. So we're not managing multiple database files. This is still just a single JSON file. And because it's a single JSON file, we sort of know what else exists in this database. So maybe what I want to do here is say, let's actually make a new field in this sheet that I'm going to rename now because new sheet is bad. Let's call this fruits. So I just renamed that sheet. I want to say where can I actually find these fruits? So I already have my table of locations here. So maybe let's actually add a new column here, and we'll call this is a new list. Let's say we would call it locations. So now I can actually open this up, and I have this list here. I'm going to turn off schema editing, which I can now say where these locations are at. So let's say, okay, well, one of these, actually, I do want to add schema location. Oops. So inside this locations here, what I want to do is I want to actually use that table I used for locations to sort of clamp what locations I have that I can access or where this thing can be found. So what I can do is I can create a line reference field. And so I can say, actually, this sheet point to something in locations, and we'll default it to America. And then now here I can set my location. So let's say that apples are found in America. And I have no idea if this is true. This one, an orange, I'm going to turn off schema editing again. An orange can be found in Spain and, I don't know, Canada. I could add another location to say, actually, I want to track what fruit is found in Germany. And I go back to my fruits tab here, and let's say I want to add a new location for Germany, etc. So I can actually like start interlinking my sheets. And then just to show you once again that there's no magic going on, it's just the man behind the curtain. I'm going to zoom this out. Sorry, just so you can see it. What this has been doing this whole time is just writing this big JSON file. So inside of this, you can kind of see it just off of like blocks. This is my list right here of locations. This is my list up here of fruits. And the way these data tables work is they're actually kind of interreferencing each other. And then if I actually zoom in on a specific line, let's look at, so this one, I'm going to zoom in on this. But just so you can sort of see what's going on under the hood, because the other side of Depot is that you want to potentially integrate this in your application. So you will kind of be looking at this JSON probably a little more. But so here I can see this is what my entry for Apple looks like. So I've already got, my weight, there's my look, and then I've got this locations array that's been formed, and it actually points to this specific field that was configured for this locations like column type. So if I look for this here, oops, one more. So this is because I wrote the code, I know what this is. This is the sort of like configuration for that column type itself. And not this one, sorry. Here we go. Yeah. This is the configuration for that column itself. And inside of its configuration, I can see that we're referencing the GUID of this other sheet. The column itself has a GUID, and it also has some lists about what can be configured or not. So then I know, based on my Apple here, it's saying, hey, this is the GUID of the field itself. So if I was actually wanting to reference that specific instance of what I'm describing a location as, it has its own GUID. But then more importantly, here, I can see that I'm actually referencing this GUID, which I have is B8AB. And if I go back to our less crazy view, and go over here, I'm going to turn on show line GUIDs. I can see here that I'm referencing that GUID. So it kind of like, we use GUIDs on the back end to kind of point to everything. And so you can start kind of interlocking all your data. So instead of, trying to author this crazy nested structure inside just a text file or something else, or even like a spreadsheet kind of falls apart for this type of work, you can really just start linking all of your data together to say, okay, pull this from here and this from here and this from here. And then additionally, as you're actually, going through all this data, the other thing that you can see that's really nice is that, so imagine that I'll make 10 new fruits now. I won't name them, but imagine that my schema changes and I say like, okay, actually now, as my product manager or something told me that I need a new field, or we're playing this video game, people want a new stat. If I add this new stat called, I don't know, what's a good fruit measurement, height, that then automatically gets added to every field that already exists. So again, you're not going into JSON and going and like literally adding and making sure you don't mistype something that's weight. And then if I go, sorry, I keep doing this a lot. If I actually go look at these values here, oops, where my fruit's at. Okay, here we go. Yeah, so I can see now they all have this height property that's already been added to them. So there's no like, oh no, I forgot to add or remove it from this other thing. It just kind of happens in the background for you. And then the opposite is also true, which is that should you choose to delete a field, so if I go to schema editing and like delete height, that automatically gets deleted from everything. We also are using, because we're using the JSON, the VS Code API, when you make changes, you'll be able to see that changes are happening, and then you can just click save. Also, because this is like new line to JSON files, the data version super well. So we use this inside of our, you can use this in Git or whatever, and you can literally see differences in like your data files because it's all just one giant new line JSON. So we use this all the time.
Real quick, there's just one question, because I think it's really important for like what's one of the really cool things about this extension is just reiterating, if you have multiple sheets, is that separate depot files or is that all just contained in one? And I think we've kind of been seeing you move back and forth. It's all just in the singular.
One file, yeah. So I'll show you real quick. We can go back to this if we want to, but so this is like a database that I just put together on this stream that would totally be workable. I'm going to show you our production database real fast. So this is the actual like, ooh, excuse me. I'm gonna zoom this out. It's more about scale to demonstrate. Let's hope we don't crash because we're doing a lot of stuff. Just a little bit more. Keep going. One more. Yeah. So this is like an actual production depot database. So this is all the terrains in our video game. You can also link in these images. So these are in here. There's nested files everywhere. And then on this thing, we have, I think it's like 7 different sheets. So we have our terrains, we have sounds, we have our list of units, and all of these have like multiple nested files. So this unit called the conscript, it's got all these nested things, and this is what it can build, and these are what it requires to build. And so you can really just like go crazy. So this file, I think, is like, I think it's like 80 or 90,000 lines of JSON, which Visual Studio Code handles like a champ, I will say. And just to prove it to you, because it is sort of fun to look at, I'm going to just rename this to JSON, and we'll see here.
Oh my gosh, look how tiny that scroll bar is.
So I said 90,000. I might have lied. excuse me, it's 44,000 lines of JSON. But we never are like hand editing this, right? So it would be impossible for us to maintain all this. But doing it in this sort of format that allows you to actually edit this stuff and view it like a spreadsheet makes it where doing all of this actual work is like super easy to kind of manage, to view, to have a view on, etc.
I think it's also super helpful because, like, if you were to have a new developer come on, they'd be able to manage this so much easier by looking at it in this view than just that raw JSON, right? Like, there's no way they'd be able to figure out what everything is. So by looking at it here, it's so much more accessible for people who are just starting on a project, unfamiliar with the data. It's so easy to just ramp up and just get started.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean it's super important. I think especially once you set up kind of your import pipeline. So one thing that we don't have right now is a great solution for kind of just arbitrary importing. I am actually working on a source generator project for people who are using C# to kind of have it source generate the typed data files. So you can just use it inside of a .NET project. That's not here yet. So you do have to kind of write some import code. But once you write your initial import code for how you want to like work with the data or whatever, you add a new field in here, you add like one more line to your import code and it like just works. And everything comes in, it's all serialized. We maintain the schema. That's the work that we do for Depot. So yeah, so it really kind of scales with like what you're looking at trying to do over time. And yeah, I skipped over some other fields, like, you have Boolean fields that allow you to check or uncheck something. You can do images. We saw that in the other video. What this actually does, it doesn't actually bake in the image. It instead saves a file path. So if I was to pick an image here, let's just grab something from my desktop. Oh, it's not going to work because it's not in the. I don't have workspace rights over that folder, so Visual Studio Code's not going to let me use that. But you can basically link in images, and it will show you paths. So if you want to, if your application needs to know a local path to an image, you can use that and then use that path to load in the image. Files are sort of similar. There's enums, so an enum might be like edible, non-editable, editable, sort of. And then I can select basically from this. Ooh, I programmed this wrong. I think I spelled something wrong here. I'm going really fast, so I'm going to mess up. But basically, this field allows you to select a single value, whereas if I do something like this, I can do a multiple. Oh, it's doing default value. I see. I was programming them wrong. So here I can now have these values exposed as this. So I could select, multiple of these. So it kind of allows you to do all this stuff. Also, if you're interested in working on this, I really want to move a lot of the Depot kind of field formats. I know Visual Studio Code just put out like a component library for WebView stuff. This is not using any of that. So if anybody has interest in doing components and WebView work, please come work on Depot, because I don't have time for it, but I would love to get those official components in. Because the other thing is that if you're not using a dark theme right now, this looks really bad. So please, if someone's interested in doing styling, that would be much appreciated.
That kind of segues. We have a question, since this is WebView, right? Are you using the WebView UI components? So definitely sounds like.
Yeah, we're not using them. This was done prior to WebView components existing. So that's why you get really lovely looking text fields that, oh, actually that one's not that bad. This is the bad one. Oof, look at this. This is pretty rough.
I love it though, because this is a great opportunity for people to start contributing to the open source community if you haven't already, or just find another great area to do it. This is open. We can post a link to the GitHub too, so that way people can find it. But yeah, you're more than welcome. I'm sure Kyle would be super appreciative if y'all would help any way that you can.
And I want to say, let me check. I will just pull it over here on the actual repo itself for Depot, which the link will come up. We do have some issues tagged as like good first issues. So if someone is interested in kind of doing something that should be sort of simple, you can work with it. There's 30 issues in the project right now, but don't get scared of that number. Most of what that is just me logging like feature ideas. Some of them are actual bugs, but like I said, we're using this in production, so this is not like an experimental tool. Like it's pretty battle tested. So highly recommend checking it out. Oh yeah, someone asked about. I just saw a question about
Yeah, we had a
field
couple
validation.
questions. One, yeah, custom validation. Is this available or is that on the roadmap?
So we sort of it depends on what you mean and at what point of data entry. So when you make a new field, we give people the ability to add in like min and max values. What we don't do is prevent you from doing that data entry at the point of entry. We sort of rely on you to interpret that value at the point of ingest. So however you're using this depot file, for example, like you might say that if this min value is 0 and this min max value is 10 and someone enters 11, we don't necessarily know how to handle that. We could assume, oh well, they ran over it, so we'll clamp it to 10. Someone also might mod it and say, actually, if you go to 11, that should be 0. So we don't proactively prevent that type of validation stuff. It's possible to maybe add it in as like some kind of extension where you can kind of write your own validators or something, but PRs are open. But yeah, so we kind of, this is more like, this is here for support. So when you're actually ingesting it, you can check against the min and max values and look at the value that's actually entered to do that sort of thing. For stuff like text fields, we have basically no validation. It's just like you have a value. We expect something to work. So yeah, I mean, that'd be great to do. It'd be a great thing to add.
Cool. So one other question we had, can you open the JSON file with this extension without changing the extension?
So right now, no. And this is maybe like the kind of the Achilles heel of some of people's adoption of Depot. So we use a specific, the JSON that Depot reads has to be in a sort of a specific format that we create. So you can't just give us a JSON file and it just work. You basically would have to start, you'd have to make the file yourself and then basically pull your JSON data over. It's not like the hardest thing, but the way I've done it in the past is that I've basically built out the Depot database to actually be like the format I want, and then just write like a really simple command line application that effectively saturates my lines with my existing data. Because, if you give us data, we don't necessarily know what stuff you want. Like you might have only 2 fields that have values. One of them is a string and one of them is an integer. We don't know which one that's supposed to be. So for now, we don't really support that. That is like a pretty common question. I would love to work on it if I wasn't working on a video game right now. But if people have ideas about how to do that, that would be great. There's a lot of good suggestions on the issue tracker on GitHub. So if you're interested in looking at that stuff or tracking some of those issues or features, definitely take a look there.
Cool. And then we have can you reference another depot from a depot?
Sort of, actually. So the way to do this is, so if I could make another depot file, I'll call this just other or something. We don't support like enter sheet linking yet, in part just because like the way that the Visual Studio Code WebView API works, it sits on top of one file. Unless this has changed in the past like 6 months, it kind of has to use one file. So unless we were sort of explicitly loading data in from kind of adjacent files, so to speak, we can't really do inter-sheet referencing necessarily. What you can do is kind of like at least to start, right, is that maybe I have all my locations are saved in this other depot file. So instead of saving them as their own sheet here, I can just make this is a file reference field, and I can, it's over here now. I can pick this and select my other depot file here. And now I have a path to this. So if you were to say like, okay, look up your stuff based on this, you could then basically, when you load this in, load that depot file with your unroller that loads it or whatever. So it's not, I know what you're talking about. Most of the time, honestly, like again, looking at this like giant database that I made here, there's like 8 sheets in here. We have no need for another file. So I would actually push back and say like, do you really need multiple files? Because most of the time anytime I've tried to start making another file, I've been like, oh, I don't need one. I just make another sheet. They're basically all just sheets. And there's no limit to the number of sheets you can make.
Cool. This is awesome. I think the people in chat really are enjoying this. One thing I did just kind of want to bring up, though, you've mentioned about your game development, right? So one thing we didn't mention is that Kyle is also the co-founder of After School Studio, which is a game development studio. So if any of y'all in chat are into game development, let us know. But yeah, do you want to talk a little bit more about that, Kyle?
Yeah, so we're so I'm the co-founder of After School Studio. We're a video game development studio, and we're currently actually about a month out from releasing our first video game, which is Cantata, which I'll just bring up on Steam real fast here. Okay, my screen's not being shared anymore.
Here, I just added it.
Yeah, so Cantata is a tactical strategy game set in a spiritual sci-fi world, inspired by games or inspired by like worlds like Cantata, or excuse me, by like Dune, like the art of like Mobius, and lucky weird sci-fi stuff, inspired by games like Advance Wars and Total War. So if you're interested in like tactical strategy stuff, May 12th is when this is going into early access. So, come over to Steam, wishlist us. The game is called Cantata, Cantata. And just like we're saying, so all of this stuff here, all these like values and units and stuff, this is coming from Depot. So we actually use Depot in the game as our modding tool. So all of the actual data is kind of built inside of Depot and then loaded into the game at runtime. So anybody who makes a mod for our game will actually be using Depot because we have a deserializer for it. So you effectively clone the kind of core Depot project and then add in some data, and then it just gets loaded in. So if you're trying to do like any sort of external data management for stuff like video games, and you don't want to use like CSV or SQL or something, and JSON traditionally has been sort of hard to wrangle, Depot is like a really great option. Like I said, literally like it's a 44,000 line JSON file to do all this stuff, but it like works. Literally all this data that you see is being loaded in through a Depot file at runtime, and it's kind of baked in to the game. So
that's awesome, because I feel like sometimes we get things and it's like it's hard to see, is this actually being used in the real world, right? You just see it in a small scale in the demo. This is so cool to actually see an actual application of this, 44,000 lines, and how this extension makes it so much easier, right? Because I don't think you'd be able to do this otherwise. That would be insane.
Yeah. And it's sort of like we were using Unity for our engine, so it's built against Unity, and Unity has some sort of tools to do data management. But I think that we were sort of like, well, we basically need a database. We need like a linked nested database that can exist locally. So we don't want, what we don't want was like, someone, I'll run the trailer while I speak about this. We didn't want someone to, actually, can I even do this? Yeah. So we didn't want something where when people were actually doing like the data editing from like the game development perspective, that we had to ping some server to grab all of our data. Like people who use like Google Sheets or Excel, it's nice to work in that format, but you don't want to have to send a web request every time you want to grab your latest data. So we just have basically a local copy of the data that is version controlled and synced, and people can just contribute to that to basically add new stuff. It also really helps us because we have a split between, our programmers and our coders and our designers. So what's really nice is that the designers and artists can basically just work in the Depot file without actually having to touch the code, because those are sort of versioned separately. And Depot gives us that ability. It gives us this kind of like offline data editing workflow that really works for us and has been like, honestly, a godsend. There's like something like 160 units that all have like pretty robust, I have one more trailer to show you. Sorry. They have like pretty robust and complicated, feature sets and configurations, and doing that in like a CSV or, sorry, the thing is lagging. Trying to do all that stuff inside of like a CSV or just a normal spreadsheet, I think would sort of tank our productivity, because then you're trying to like come up with weird like VLOOKUP stuff to figure out how to like enter reference data. So yeah, I mean, Depot, it's the backbone of this game that you're looking at now. And I can't imagine trying to make something like this without it. So
right. That's awesome. The trailer looks great. So yeah, May 12th, y'all be on the lookout for that. VS Code wants to know, can you teach us how to make a game?
I could. I don't know if I would teach you well. It's yeah, making a game is I feel like I'm one of the only people who really loves using Visual Studio Code for game development. It's like I think a lot of people use Visual Studio, but also yeah, this whole game is programmed in Visual Studio Code. I tried Visual Studio, and shout out to that team, but I think the speed of Visual Studio Code was like bar none. The peaking references, especially for C#, is like transcendent. It makes code just being so much easier to track and run through. So I think that like code has been a core part of making this game just from the start, and to be able to use Depot with that, it keeps everything totally in the same environment, which is like super nice. So yeah, I don't know. Can I teach you to make a game? Maybe.
DP the Gray. Yes, let's just ask Copilot.
Yeah, Copilot would totally tell you what to do.
Well, that's awesome. Maybe we can have another live stream in the future on VS Code and game development, because it seems like that's a hot topic.
I would like that. Yeah, I would like that.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that's all the questions we had today. Kyle, thank you so much. This Depot editor extension was great. Great way to very easily visualize your JSON files, make the edits quickly, all contained in one file. So definitely check it out. It's a free extension on the marketplace. But otherwise, thank you so much, Kyle, for joining. Thank you, chat, for coming. If you are on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to us. And then also, we make several TikToks a week. So if you want to go ahead and see us post there and make fools of ourselves, check that out too. All right. So thank you all for joining. Kyle, again, thank you. This was great. Looking forward to maybe having you on a future live stream too.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll see you all next week for another Thursday live stream.